G'day, welcome to another one of my casting sessions. One of the commonly heard problems that I get from students coming to me for a lesson or attending one of my casting days is I can't get my leader to unroll, it keeps collapsing. So I'm going to address that problem in a series of demonstrations and explanations. Firstly, let's deal with your leader. Is it appropriate to the fishing that you're trying to do? Is it too long? Is it too short? Is it too thin or too fine for the size flies that you're throwing? If you're throwing bigger wind-resistant flies and you've got a long, fine leader, it's not going to unroll. Okay, so basic leader construction is something you have to look at. But even before leader construction, let's talk about the line that the leader is made with. So for those of you who perhaps are fairly new to this, the leader is this is the fly line, it's the end of my fly line, and then the leader is this near visible connection between the fat end of the fly line and the fly represented here by a little piece of wool. So this leader is about 12, 13 feet long. It's tapered. I made this one up myself. It's tapered from a series of diminishing diameter lengths of nylon. And that nylon, when it comes off the spool, can be very coily. Or if it's been stored on the reel for a while, it can also be very coily. One thing about nylon is that it dries out, it dehydrates. And if you haven't used it for a while and it's been stored on a reel, it's going to be even more coily. So you've got to straighten it out. One thing I notice over time is that when I've been fishing with a leader for a day or so, it gets better, it becomes much limper. And that's because it's actually absorbed water. So a leader will absorb about 10% of its mass in water, and in so doing becomes far limper. So I guess if you're really serious about it, you could soak your leader in water overnight before you went fishing. But if you're not that serious, it really pays to give your leader a damn good stretch before you start fishing. And I do that like this. They used to recommend you use a little piece of inner tube rubber and draw the leader through the inner tube rubber. But that can generate too much heat and damage the outside coating of the nylon. So I prefer to just draw it over my thumb under pressure, and that pressure will generate sufficient heat to soften the nylon or the fluorocarbon. So I'm pulling it, I'm stretching it, and I'm running it over my thumb here to generate heat that softens it and stretches it at the same time. And that, sometimes you might need to do it twice on a really cold morning, and that will straighten your leader out beautifully. Let's see, that should hang a lot straighter now. You possibly can't see it from there, but that's straightened right out. So that's one thing you can do, because a leader that's coily is going to spring back at you. And that's one of the reasons they don't straighten out. Now let's go into some of the others. The first I want to talk about is power. How much power you put into a cast. Because if you overpower a cast, and most blokes do, when that line straightens out and the leader straightens out, it's going to spring back at you. And that springing back is slack. And that would look like this, overpowering. There we are, just sprung way back at me, just coiled up at the end, and again, and the leader has sprung back and collapsed in a heap. Okay, so back the power off. This would be underpowering. So this leader is not going to roll over because I've underpowered it. It's collapsed. Simply not enough power. Good casting stroke, but simply not enough power. So let's find somewhere in between too much power and not enough power. That would be something like this. It unrolled. And it's a really good question to ask yourself, how much power do I need in a cast? And the answer is pretty simple. Only enough to get the fly to the target under the circumstances. So this is too much. Fly's not getting to the target. This is too little. Fly's collapsed, the leader's collapsed. And this, under these circumstances, with this setup, is just about right. Leader has unrolled beautifully. Okay, so power. Control your power, observe your power. The next thing I want to talk about is trajectory. So trajectory is the angle at which we are casting. Now I just get my cast teaching aid here. So this is a couple of lengths of dowel that are going to roughly represent our casting arc, the angle through which we rotate or accelerate the rod, coming back and forwards. This would be, you can see that the line between the tip here and the tip here is a straight line, but it's horizontal. If we just tilt, if this was a clock, there would be 12 o'clock. Now we're just going to tilt the clock so that our forward cast here is stopping lower and our back cast is stopping higher. There's no change to the arc. It's still much the same. I could do it the other way. If I tilted back this way, went low at the back and high at the front, I'd be sending the cast way up into the air. But in this case, we're going to aim our cast low at the front. So I'm going to demonstrate that. This would be, just straighten this out, this would be horizontal. Okay, so it's the same height at the back as it is at the front. Now I'm going to go low at the back and high at the front. I'm exaggerating here. Okay, I'm exaggerating it. Now for the want of demonstration, now I'm going to go same arc, lower at the front, higher at the back, so that I am aiming my unrolling loop and my fly down at the target. You can see out there I've got a tennis ball on top of a stick, and that's probably the height I want to aim at in order to get my leader to unroll above the water and land the fly gently. This would be too low. This would be crashing it into the water, and that's not going to unroll. This would be just right. So I'm actually aiming at the tennis ball and then having the fly settle on the target. So my target is about 1 metre off the water. If I finish my forward cast too high and then try and get the fly on the water, I do that and it's just blown way off target. Or if I aim high and stop the rod high, it's all fallen back in a heap. Lots of slack, very good cast if you want a deliberate slack line presentation. Perfect cast for that. But most of us don't want that. And what we want to do now is to straighten the leader out, and then you can learn that later as one of your presentation casts where we deliberately throw slack. Okay, so being able to control the trajectory of the cast. So here I'm aiming down at the target. And that's going to unroll the leader above the water, rather than have it collapse back on itself onto the water. The next thing to consider is your pause. So the pause is the time we allow for the line to unroll in the air. Not fully, almost fully unroll in the air. One of the great killers of good casting is slack, or a lack of tension in the line. So if we pause too long, gravity will take over, the line will fall, and two things happen. We've lost tension, but the second thing that happens with the line falling back behind us, we'll take it that these sticks are now the line falls back behind us here. I've now got to bring this line right over the top in a big dome to get to the front. And that big dome is going to lead to a big curved fly leg, a big curved cast, which is going to collapse in a heap. So too much pause looks like this. On the next one, in a heap. I'll do that again. Too much pause looks like this. And it landed in a heap. So too little pause coming forward too soon is also slack. And that looks like this. Leader landed in a big heap. I'm exaggerating this slightly for the demonstration. And the subtleties in this pause can be, milliseconds. But pause too long and pause too short, and the result will, particularly on the back here, which is where it usually happens, and the result out the front will be a collapsed leader, a leader that doesn't straighten. One of the things we really understand about fly casting is that the path that the tip of the rod takes during the casting stroke creates the shape of the fly leg of the loop, and that fly leg is the one that's unrolling. A domed path of the tip of the rod, like so, like a windscreen wiper, will lead to a big curved fly leg which is going to collapse in a pile. A domed path of the tip of the rod is usually a consequence of too much wrist here. See how I'm going? It's a real flip-flop cast. And the tip of the rod is moving in a big curve, and I'm generating no power whatsoever, and that is landing in a heap. Again, I'm exaggerating a little for effect. But that dome doesn't need to be much to collapse the leader. And one of the causes of a collapsed leader, it might have a good cast, but it can be the first part of the forward cast, the first part when we first come forward, coming over in a dome here, which leads to a curved leader at the front of the cast. So if we start with a tip path like this, we could straighten it out, but what this bit here is going to produce is a downward collapsing leader at the front. That looks like this. And there it goes. When I talked about the pause, I talked about it's one of the sources of slack coming into the cast. Okay, but there are others. One is when we feed the line into the cast here. Now, during the casting stroke, the rod and the line are under tension. If I feed slack into the cast during the stroke, it detensions the rod. So look at just watch my left hand here. I left slack into the cast during the stroke, which caused the whole thing to collapse. Okay, so we introduce shooting line at the end of the stroke when the loop stopped the rod, the loop is formed, stop the rod, now we introduce the line, we shoot line into the cast. We cannot do it during the casting stroke. Okay, or it's going to land in a pile. One of the key elements of a good cast for me, particularly throwing long, fine leaders, is using a really positive stop at the forward cast here. Stop, stop, stop at the back cast. A soft stop will depower the cast, and there we go, the leader collapse. So here we go, stop, 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 stop. Here's a soft stop. You could say I've run the stop sign. That's a $500 fine, I think. So don't run the stop sign. Put your positive stop in, form the loop, and then lower the rod. And if you aim low enough, if you aim at the target, it's going to go to the target. So the relationship between the stop and slack is an important and quite fine one. I can throw a nice loop, create a good stop, but then push forward with the rod like so. Got quite a cross breeze here. Stop, stop, and then push. By reaching forward at the wrong time, I've introduced slack to the cast. It's another way of throwing a good slackline presentation. But if you want to straighten your leader out, don't do it. I'll do that again. Stop and then reach forward into it. You can see it's just collapsed in a pile. A really positive stop without any slack. I think this little action of the wrist at the end, Lefty Craig called it the speed up and stop. This really positive action with the wrist at the end of the cast is what for me really produces that turning over leader. There. I'll do that again. There. There at the end of the stroke. Make it positive. Make it positive. You're using a stick to throw a piece of string, and there's no good just waving it around. Throw it. Make it positive and allow the taper in the leader to depower the presentation. Just the taper, not you, unless it's what you deliberately want to throw, okay? One of the more common causes of the leader failing to straighten is what we call a tailing loop. So a tailing loop is when we often comes from overpowering the cast, but most particularly mispowering the cast, where we apply the power in the cast in the middle of the stroke. Even if it's not a lot of power, if we misapply it, what happens is it causes the rod tip to dip, and then it'll come back up again. And that dip and coming back up again will create a dip and a coming back up again in the fly leg. And now this shape in the air is trying to unroll, but it's meeting a lot of resistance. So that looks like this. There it is there. It also sends the line high. So that's a tailing loop. And that tailing loop, not only will it cause the leader to collapse, but it will also introduce knots and tangles in your leader. So avoid them at all costs, and the solution for those is smooth acceleration. Smooth, smooth, smooth. Above all, practice to be smooth, not jerky. So all of those can contribute to a lousy presentation cast with a collapsed leader. But just remember this, that the actual presentation cast should be one of your series of false casts. So we false cast in order to get our line and our length, to judge the distance to where we want to put the fly, and to judge the line where we want to put the fly. And I see it all the time. Lovely false cast, all looking good, and then just depower that last presentation cast. Or some people overpower it, or depower it. They depower it thinking that they want to allow the fly to unroll gently, but all they've done is collapse their leader. So your presentation cast should be simply one of your false casts. Bang, there it is. I don't know how often I see someone throw, and everyone who's watched someone cast will have seen this. Nice cast, here comes the presentation. Or, nice cast, here comes the presentation. Just make it another one of your false casts. You've got your line, you've got your length, then just put the fly down. So there's a variety of different ways there we can not unroll the leader. Okay, there's a bunch of different causes. Most commonly is a dome path at the tip of the rod, or a high trajectory where everything falls back on itself. I'd urge you to practice casting to be smooth and to look for solutions. If your leader isn't unrolling, aim a little lower, apply a little more power at the end of the cast here. Like if I want to throw a dart at that tennis ball, I'm not going to go like this. I'm not going to go like this, throw it up there. I'm going to throw at it. So throw at your target. And that's this wrist firing at the end of the stroke. There, there, there. It's a really positive acceleration and stop at the end of the stroke. And that'll help your leader unroll, provided you've straightened it and provided it's a well-constructed leader. So thanks for watching, and tight loops to everybody. Tight, narrow loops with unrolling leaders. Go to it.